Today we have an expert guest, Aaron Tisdell. She's a LinkedIn profile expert. So if you want to open the floodgates, the leads, new opportunities in your career or business, you don't want to miss this one. Let's dive straight in with Aaron. This is a conversation that's been in the works for a couple of months since we first touched base. It's taken a while to pull this together. So I'm very excited to have Aaron Tisdell on today's podcast episode. Now, did I say your surname correctly?
You did. Thank you so much for asking, because I get a lot of Tisdale and then people are like, I can't find you on LinkedIn. I'm like, it's Tisdell. So thank you so much. Perfect, Aaron. You nailed it.
Well, I think there's a niche for pronouncing surnames correctly, because the amount of times I mispronounce and need to get corrected is very high. So good start.
I don't know. I think you've got a special skill so far. I'm really thrilled to be with you today, because I think, your podcast is adding so much value, and I love how real you are in your podcast, how you share what it is you're learning and you're discovering. And I really love that. It's an approach I think I take myself. We're all growing together, aren't we?
I think so, yeah. And that's why I was really excited to get you on. You have a very useful skill set that I think a lot of people overlook, yet the subtle differences some changes can make with what you help them with can really transform them professionally, or if they're in business owners, the opportunities. So I think that's a good place to sort of kick off. Maybe you can just sort of tell the listeners your area of specialization when it comes to profiles, because it's quite a skill that can make a huge difference.
I'm really lucky. I'm an early adopter of LinkedIn, started using LinkedIn in 2005. And in 2009, I started writing LinkedIn profiles. And my business has taken a few wrong turns. In 2014, I attracted a lot of speaking opportunities because there were not many LinkedIn experts in Australia, let alone globally, really. There was really only a few of us at the time, a handful of us, and we all knew each other. So I sort of thought, I'll be a LinkedIn trainer and I'll be a LinkedIn coach. And, I've really, since about late 2017, really come back to my roots. What I love is helping people look amazing on platforms. So, I am very niche. I do LinkedIn training and other stuff, but my core thing, and it'd be about 80% of my work, is writing LinkedIn profiles.
I know your background is in recruitment and you've got an extensive history, and there was a bit of a backstory that led into that opportunity in helping people with LinkedIn.
Yeah, there is actually. Thank you for asking, and thank you for doing your homework. I really appreciate that. The backstory is, when I first saw LinkedIn in 2005, I'm not always an early adopter. I'm really not. I think my mobile phone is testament to that. I took it into JB Hi-Fi, a retail outlet here in Australia that sells electronic gadgets, and they laughed at my phone. So I am not always an early adopter, but working in recruitment for 14 years, 2005, we had this visionary CEO, Luke Henningsen, and he did a lunch and learn about LinkedIn. And my mind was just blown, because I could see that this was a place where I could keep in touch with everybody that I'd ever met. And so when I saw LinkedIn, I was just taken right back to my childhood address book. It had a picture of Holly Hobby on the front. And I used to collect everybody's names and phone numbers. And, because I wanted to be really grown up when I was a kid, I never wrote in pencil because that's what we had to do at school. So I wrote in pen, and you kept having to use this like whiteout Tipex stuff to redo it every time people changed their address. And I loved collecting names and addresses. And so when I saw LinkedIn, I just thought, wow, this is like, nowadays you'd think of it as my own personal CRM database of everybody I've ever met. But, CRM databases weren't around in 2005, or certainly I didn't know of them. I don't think they were. And so I just loved it. I could see it like that. And the reason why I've always been obsessed with keeping in touch with people is because I know professional success is all about who you know. It's all about, yes, it's about content, but as you always say in your podcast, step 1 and 2 is build yourself an audience. And, my dad as a kid always used to tell these amazing stories of his professional success. He was in sales, actually. So he had amazing clients, but he also had amazing job opportunities all over the world. And he used to tell these extraordinary stories, and they always ended with, and I secured that role, or I got that customer because of who I knew. And, he always talked about who he knew. So LinkedIn is a relationship management platform. more than anything else in many ways.
Yeah, and what's interesting is since the world's transitioned into the digital space and these platforms, the profile is that first impression that we get to make with someone. So how important is that profile when that's the first impression someone has of you when they stumble across your digital version of you?
Now, just for the audience, I just want to know, and I want you to know, Aaron, I love your work. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I love the value you're giving your audience. But I think that people think of LinkedIn as just a publishing platform. It's a place where you put out content. And we have to remember, when people look at your content, what do they do next? It's very rare that they buy straight from a content. I loved your tip. I think it was about July 2023, where you said something about putting PS in articles or posts or whatever. PS, if you want to work with me, this is where you can find me, So flatten that path to being contacted. So I'm all for having a PS or for having some sort of like signature at the end of your post. So your post gives value, and at the end of your piece of content, you have your contact details. But even if you have your contact details in your post, people are going to look at your profile, and also people will search, because it's interesting that as the world gets bigger and we know more people and we interact with more strangers, we actually look for referrals more. And marketing people are seeing that word of mouth marketing is huge. We don't go into a restaurant unless we've checked out how many Google reviews it's got. So if we can have a look at type names into the search bar and go, okay, well, who do we know in common? That person, I've got a lot of connections in common with them. It's as powerful as being in a close location. It's that proximity factor of who you know. So your profile is not going to rank very high if you don't have the right keywords through your LinkedIn profile, and if your profile doesn't talk to the problems you solve.
Interesting. Yeah, I think people do forget that a lot of these social platforms are search platforms. And if you're not catering to that, then you're missing the opportunity. So on that note, what are some of the big mistakes that you see the average person making with their profiles?
My biggest thing is headlines. It's the bit that sits underneath your name. It's 220 characters long, so you can have a lot of keywords in there. And most people are still stuck with the idea that it's 120 characters, which is what it was quite a few years ago, and they haven't gone back and revisited it and put more keywords in there. And the default is that it's just your position title. So if your position title is founder, it just says founder. And that doesn't tell me the value you offer. So every time you create a piece of content, you direct message somebody, you comment on somebody else's post, every time you do that, then your headline is visible. So we have to keep in mind that when people see your headline, particularly if you're commenting on a post, they're looking at about the first 44 characters. So you really want to front load your headline with the most important words. And I see a lot of headlines where people have talked to digital marketers or whatever, and they've got I help small businesses to build, and that's where it cuts off. So I think it's so important to make sure that you keep it really simple up front, So I always think of this as like the grandma test. And the reason why I think of it as the grandma test is because for years I was trying to explain to my dear old mum what I do for a living. And my mum was just looking at me confused. And I was using words like personal branding and helping people show up, and it's about helping them market themselves. And my mum was just looking at me blankly. And then I said, I write LinkedIn profiles, and LinkedIn is like Facebook for suits. And my mum got it. You can have a lot of words in there, and they can be fluffy words, they can be sentences, they can be a couple of words, but just make sure you front load it with something that's really simple. Keep it clear and concise initially.
What I find interesting is a lot of profiles I'll have entrepreneur, investor. What's your take on people loading those sorts of terms into their profile headline?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the gems that you often drop in your podcast, where you often say, think about the needs of your audience. And so people do that, I hope, mostly, if they're listening to you, when they're creating content. But then when they come to their profile, they write their profile for themselves. They write their profile to look like the hero. You don't want to be the hero. Your customer is the hero. You want to be the trusted guide. You want to be the person they can trust. So don't write your LinkedIn profile for you to impress you. You might think of yourself as an entrepreneur and, you're thinking, oh, I want to be my best self, but nobody cares about you. They just care about their problem. Does that sound too harsh? What do you reckon?
That's how I've delicately tried to put it. There's no, and you think about it for yourself. You, generally speaking, everyone's only obsessed with what's going on in their world. And then when you stumble across a profile and someone else has said, well, unless you're a really significantly established brand where people would know that you're an entrepreneur, people just really don't care. But when you talk about, well, how can you help them or what's in it for them, you get a very different response than if you're pumping your own tires up.
Absolutely. Like when I think of you, yes, you can describe you as an influencer and all these sort of things, but actually that's not helpful to anybody. That's what's trying to sort of compete with them for who's the most awesome. What you do is you create content for other people. I want to talk about what you do for them. And you want to have it in your headline. You want to have it in your about section, formerly known as a summary section. And you also want to have it in your experience section. I see a lot of people who own businesses who upload a logo and they create a company page. And I think you've got episodes that talk to that. But then they don't put a lot of details in the experience section. And I think that's a really missed opportunity, especially if you've got a big ticket item. If you're a lawyer or an architect is a very sort of personal profession. You need to feel that the person really understands you. So, you've got 2,000 characters in your experience section to write about what your business does. You've got 2,600 characters in your about section to talk about what your business does. So I think it's really important to do that. I think another missed opportunity is not having contact details. I mean, how many times, Aaron, do you have a look at somebody's profile and you're like, because you and I buy from the internet, right? You look at their profile and you're like, oh my gosh, this person solves all my problems. I finally found a dog walker who's around the corner from me who can dog sit my cat or something over Christmas, and you're having a look through their profile and they haven't changed their privacy settings so that everybody can see their contact details under contact information. And perhaps they haven't done that because they don't want to be spammed, but they also don't have their contact information details in their about section or in their experience section, which are sections that cannot be scraped by a machine. So it's a real missed opportunity, I reckon, not to flatten the path to being contacted.
Thank you. You summed it up beautifully, because the inbound effect is really, really powerful when people are reaching out to you and saying, hey, I think you can help me. I want to learn more. But people are putting barriers and hurdles and blocks in the way of that simplicity, where just a simple tweak like that, adding your contact details, making them accessible, all of a sudden people start contacting you.
I think we just have to remember, don't we, that, people have got quite short attention spans. I remember years ago getting into an argument, actually, really, with a digital marketer. And he's like, oh, but, people can Google my name and they can go to, I've driven all these views to my website because that's my objective, is to get everybody to look at my website. And I'm like, so they're clicking on your content and your content drives them to your LinkedIn profile, and then your LinkedIn profile is driving them to a website. And then when they're on their website, your website, there's not easily a contact you form, or maybe you have to fill out a form. It's just too many paths. Everybody wants everything sort of quite fast and flat. So don't make it easy for people. I think it's really important. What's your biggest bugbear about profiles? Are you even excited about profiles? What do you reckon, Aaron? Because you're a bit of an expert yourself.
I'm massive on profiles, and I really understood the importance of it more recently, because I had different profiles across the different social media channels for various reasons. But when we came up with the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system for personal brands, just by putting that in the profile, people started reaching out. And I was like, okay, that one tweet, people going, oh, that's actually what you do. They inquired about it, go, I want to learn more about that model, that process. So I'm a perfect case study for simplifying the profile and having easy means to contact, about how that immediately can have an impact if you're being quite active online.
Yeah, give people the options on how they can buy you, and tell people what they can buy, so not just in your headline, keeping it simple up front, But simple doesn't mean short. A lot of people think, I have to have a really short summary. And I think you don't have to. You can break it into sections. You can have bullet points in there. You can use bold and italics, but we have to remember that if you do bold things in LinkedIn using yaytext.com, which is YAY text.com. If you do that, then the words you've bolded can't be seen in the search filters. So always make sure that, if you're a leadership coach, for instance, and you've bolded the words leadership coach, make sure you've got them in other parts because, that's really going to impact how you show up. You need to have it multiple times. You want to give people a lot of information about you, but just, as you've said, keep it simple.
So we've covered quite a few already, but what would you say are the top sort of 2 or 3 immediate tweaks that people can make to their profile that start to move the needle for them?
Make sure that you've got lots of keywords in your headline, the bit that sits underneath your name, and make sure that you front load it with what it is you actually do. Look at your about section and think about the problems of your audience. And when you've written your about section, focusing on how you solve your problems, the problems for your clients, you've got some contact details in there and you've got something personal because you want to show who you are, what your values are. Make sure that you put at the front of the very top of your about section, put something that's an insight, something that's really interesting. It might be a jarring statement that polarizes people because you don't want to be all things to all people. Or it might be a question that your customers are always wondering. Or it might be a statistic, So a statistic I hear you say often is, 1% of all people on LinkedIn create content. Have a statistic, have something that starts in your about section. You never want to have an about section that starts with, I'm a senior leader with 25 years. It's like boring, have something that makes people go, oh, that's interesting. And they're, the right people are leaning in. And in your experience section, give some details, talk about, and in your experience section, that's where you can go really hard in the sale. I think if people have scrolled down long enough to the experience section, you've earned the right to be very salesy and saying, we solve these problems, this is the difference we've delivered. This is how you can buy us, be upfront. Don't sort of, pussyfoot around really. Just, tell people what they can buy and how they can buy it.
I think that's a really, really good point because I didn't even consider that. If people have got to that part of your profile, they've gone pretty deep. So that's an absolute piece of gold there. And there's a lot of probably sections or parts that people can add to their profile on LinkedIn that people probably don't even realize, like their portfolio and things like that. And I think if you've got a Sales Navigator or premium or professional account, you can actually have that link that sits on your profile in the feed. When your content's there, they can click and actually go to something. So what are some other things that people can add to their profile that they might not know about that can make a big difference?
I'm so excited you asked that question. Where you said there's that link with Sales Navigator Premium, you can add a custom button to your website or book an appointment. And this is not easy to find even for advanced LinkedIn users. So it's in your top card, which is the bit which has got your name field. And on the right-hand side, you've got a pencil, and that's where you can edit your name, your headline, scroll all the way to the bottom. A lot of people don't realize you can slide that bar all the way down. At the very bottom, there is a custom button. You have to have premium to do that. And that custom button will follow you around, the premium custom button, every time you post a piece of content, and it will also be visible in people's messages. So when you direct message somebody, they'll see that custom button. So direct message, not in mail. If you're on LinkedIn and you're creating a lot of content and you activate creator mode, which means you start getting lots of followers but less connections, and connections are more valuable as potential clients because you can direct message each other and you can invite them to events and things like that. So if you do choose to activate creator mode, look at your followers and send them invites to connect if they're relevant. But with creator mode, you also get a custom button. So you can't have both of them. You have to choose which one you want. So for me, being a premium member, I've opted for a custom button, not the creator mode button. I also think that the featured section is massively underutilized. So, how many times, Aaron, do you look at somebody's featured section and either they haven't got one or they put their posts there, and if you're creating content, that's fantastic. Go you, pat yourself on the back, because that's awesome way of driving views to your LinkedIn profile, which is a great way of getting clients. It's inbound inquiries through LinkedIn if you're creating content. That's interesting. And don't get disheartened if you've started creating content, you've only created 5 pieces and you haven't got a client. It takes a while, doesn't it? Everybody tells me it's a shorter time than other platforms. I don't play anywhere else. But it's a long game, really, and it's an investment in yourself. I have people who've been following my content for years who don't ever like and comment on it, and suddenly they become my client, so it takes a while. But with creating content, LinkedIn will prompt you to add your posts to your featured section. But when you do that, I can already see your posts it's automatically showing me your activity. So I don't see the point of putting them in featured as well. Instead, I think in your featured section, that's where you should add a link to your website. If you've worked with a marketer and you've created a lead magnet, that's where you can put your lead magnet. Something that's very effective for me and gets a lot of views and a really high conversion rate is I've got a video on mine. It's a little under 2 minutes long, and it just says what working with me looks like. I recorded 3 of these, and the first 2, I didn't stumble on any of my words, and it was perfect. I uploaded the one where I stumbled on my words because I ditched the teleprompter, Aaron. I didn't want it. It just felt so scripted. And so I just thought, and wouldn't. So I just talked to the video on what working with me was like and how feisty I am and all that sort of stuff so that it's ruling people out. And I just get so many compliments on that video, and I get so many people say, I'll watch that video and it really helped me to buy your services. And so for our listeners today, for those who are in a personal business, like they're a leadership coach or they're an architect or they're a hairdresser. You need to trust your hairdresser a lot, Aaron. It's a big trust thing. I like that you're nodding. Yeah. Or you're particular about your hair too. That's so important. Then you want to have a video. But if you're a bricklayer or maybe you're an engineer, then I don't need to like you as much. I just need to know you're really great at your job. So you might want to have a different sort of video that showcases some of your products. I think those are so important to put in your featured section.
So when you've gone through and you've helped the client sort of transform their profile with all the tips that you just suggested, what typically follows for that client now that they've set their profile up correctly? How does their experience, their business and their world change with those tweaks?
Oh, I've just been in touch with a client of mine recently, and she was a client of mine in June 2023, and I caught up with her in late November, and she secured 4 board roles. So now one of those was nothing to do with LinkedIn, but the other 3 came off announcements. So she was a board director looking for more roles. I've had some clients just secure so many opportunities, particularly from their announcement. So an announcement is where you've set up a new business line or something like that, and maybe you've got 2 products linked in your experience section. And by 2 products, so I'm a LinkedIn profile writer, but also do trainer. So if people have a look at my profile, Karen Tisdell, you'll see that I've got LinkedIn profile writer at the top, but then I uploaded another service line. And when I did that, I triggered an announcement by LinkedIn said, do you want to tell the world that you've got a new job? And I just said, yes. And then I swapped out LinkedIn's really boring, hey, I've just got a new job with a picture of, me, somebody dancing around balloons or whatever. I've swapped that out with an image of, my logo and things like that, things that are a bit more professional and talking to the service. And they've won my clients so many roles. One of my clients got a $20,000 project off one of those, which was just fantastic. So, but that's not to say it's a silver bullet. You can't just write a great LinkedIn profile and suddenly you start getting clients. You need to create content. You need to look at who's looking at your profile, which is hard to do if you don't have premium. But, you need to be constantly building your audience and constantly giving value. It doesn't just work for you. You need to work it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit, the content side. So you've got your profile set up. So you've got that dialed in. What role does content then play for people that are on LinkedIn and want to utilize it as a tool to either grow professionally professionally or grow their business?
It builds trust, and it also reminds people of your expertise. So like yourself, I'm a big fan of giving value with content, having content that's all about serving your audience. And I've heard you use the expression give away the farm, which really made me cheer loudly, because that's an expression I always say. I say, don't have this sort of 1980s mindset of I have to protect my IP. We're in the days of Google. There almost is no IP. I can find out how to do anything if I Google for long enough, but working with an expert just shortens that time spent learning and perfecting the craft, So when you go to somebody like you to help you create content, they can learn that same model just by following you, but they haven't got that 10,000 hours of experience. I'm all about be like that famous chef and just give away your recipes, because people who can't afford it or whose pain is not big enough yet, they'll take those recipes and they'll just start cooking those dishes themselves. And in doing that, they'll become your biggest fan. So I think content is all about people becoming your biggest fan and feeling addicted to the information that you're giving them and feeling like they know you. And feeling like they know you, I know you talk about different content pillars. I do content a little bit differently, where my content is how-to content. I don't ever have I very rarely, it's not to say I don't ever, I very rarely create a piece of content that is just sharing who I am and something that's going on in my life. Instead, it's all how-to content, but woven in there is a story. And those stories are deep and big or funny, So I created a piece of content and I spoke about me roller skating in the 1980s because, I am in my 50s. I'm totally embracing that. And I had so many people go, oh my gosh, roller skating, blue light discos, and people were like, a lot of people my age, you're probably thinking, what is a roller skate? It's a bit like a rollerblade, Aaron. So, like a lot of people really related to that. I've created content that was in celebration of fathers and Father's Day. And I spoke about my dad dying. But in that piece of content about my dad, I talked about how I had turned up on his doorstep when he was too sick and he didn't want to see anybody. And I said, look, Dad, I've been flown here by Telstra to do some training. So I didn't pay for the flight, so don't be so tight about money. I'm here, spend some time with me. And I got 2 speaking gigs out of that. And the article was not meant to be an advert, but whenever I create a piece of content, always make sure that I put it in there that I'm a LinkedIn profile writer. Very rarely do I mention LinkedIn training because it's not a big thing for me. But, I'm always mentioning those sorts of things. And I think that's really important to continually remind people of what you do and to funnel views back to your profile.
That's such good advice. And I certainly didn't place you in your 50s. So there's a massive compliment for you. So you feel great about that.
Gotta love filters.
When I think rollerblades, I just think broken arms.
I think dislocated kneecaps. I dislocated one of my kneecaps 4 times.
Wow.
I was a speed demon, I was. Frequently used to slam into the wall, but, these days it's snow skiing. But, yeah, as a kid it was a roller skate.
Still got the thrill seeker going. I love that.
I am.
Something that I noticed you mentioned that on your site that is really important, because if someone Googles themselves, and chances are, if you've got a name that's not like John Smith, that you can find up some results. You mentioned that LinkedIn, and this is true, often comes up in those top results. So how much is that Google result being influenced by their LinkedIn profile?
Hugely. Yes and no. So when I say hugely, LinkedIn trusts Google. I have heard a couple of LinkedIn trainers recently say that Google doesn't trust LinkedIn because LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft and Microsoft own Bing. And so it would just make sense that LinkedIn isn't trusted by Google. But actually, that's just not true. Google your own name and your LinkedIn profile will always rank really high. If you are, say, an architect and you put Karen Tisdell architect, that's actually not going to increase your ranking on LinkedIn. And having post nominals beside your name, like lots of people will put hundreds of post nominals next to their name, or they'll put architect or whatever next to their name. It's actually in breach of LinkedIn's rules to have words that are not your name in there, but I don't think they really care that much actually. But it just looks a bit odd, I think, to have heaps of words in there in your name field. And also, it's a bit of a double up because when people do click through to your LinkedIn profile, those post-nominals or what you do, architect, should be at the front of your headline. So it looks a bit weird if you've got Karen Tisdell, architect, in your name field, and then in your headline, you've got architect, because then people are going to see all the time in direct messages, Karen Tisdell, architect, which just looks weird. So it's very trusted by Google. It always will be, because LinkedIn invests so much money and so much time in security and in keeping that information really safe. It's not to say that there's not bad actors on LinkedIn. There are, but the data breaches are next to nil compared to every other social media platform.
The very different energy too on LinkedIn compared to other social platforms, and the way that people interact with content, the way they treat each other. It is a lot more professional, and there's a lot less things like trolling. So yeah, do you have anything to comment on that aspect of LinkedIn?
What do you think? Because you've invested more time in Facebook. Do you find LinkedIn a bit too stodgy and stale? I mean, you're obviously interested in it, or you wouldn't have had me on your podcast, for which I'm grateful. So you obviously see it as a really important tool. Somebody once said, isn't LinkedIn like the daggy old uncle in the room? And I'm like, I love my daggy old uncle. I love him. My Uncle Pete, he's daggy, but I totally love him. How do you feel about it? Do you think it's a bit too professional?
Not really. I think that it has a really clear role. Certainly as a business owner, I really value LinkedIn, and I think it has a very different way of utilization than those other platforms, which I quite like. So there's content that I might put on to other channels that I wouldn't put on LinkedIn, and there might be something that I'd only put on LinkedIn that I wouldn't put on those other channels. So I kind of like the fact that it is quite professional and it is quite encouraging with the community on there. In all the years I've been on there, I don't think I've ever received a comment that's been offensive. And I put a lot of content out there over the years, but as soon as you start being active on the other platforms, people are probably going to have something to say about anything. But yeah, I've just found it to be a really nice platform to be on, because you don't get that harsh feedback from someone that's hiding behind an avatar or a fake name that you get on the other platform. So that professionalism, to me, it actually adds the authenticity, and people kind of have to be more of themselves than when they can hide behind a handle on another platform. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think that's twofold. And so what I mean by twofold is you do have LinkedIn's health and safety team are very big on security and shutting down lots and lots of bad actors and false profiles. So they're very big on that, and they're continually investing more and more money and resources in that. But it's also that people link to their company pages. And so while there are a lot of business owners who are on LinkedIn, the majority of people are probably employees, they're customers, there are people who work for somebody. And so people have lost their jobs by being sexist and racist on the platform. And I know of that because it's made it into the papers. People have spoken about it. People have sort of said, gosh, I lost my job because I said this really racist comment. And it's reflected on my company. Like, my employer saw that because we're both connected, or they're just following you, or you're connected to the company page. So I think people are a lot more sanitized and a lot more likely to put their best foot forward. And the marketing advantage of that is, if you were to compare, can I have a go at Instagram? Is that all right, Aaron?
Absolutely.
I reckon I'm the only Australian woman who's not on Instagram, because I just can't see the point of it. And some of my girlfriends, they're totally addicted to Instagram. And would you believe I can't persuade all of them that LinkedIn's really excited? They're like, oh, I love Insta. I can't have another platform. I'm like, but what would be the point from a business perspective, a business owner's perspective, if you're on Instagram? And I'm sure it's great for selling clothes and makeup and stuff like that. All my friends seem to buy a lot of things on it. So like loads of things. And now my husband started buying things from it. But anyway, let's not talk about him. And so it's great for sort of selling those kind of products. But if you are selling a service, let's come back to that example of being an architect or a bricklayer. if you're selling a service and you're on LinkedIn, if you're looking at my profile, even with free, I can see that if I'm on it constantly looking at who's looking at my profile. If I'm on premium, I can see everybody's looked at my profile unless they've hidden their privacy settings. So I can see who you are and I can reach out and say, hey, I noticed you looked at my profile. I can see we share a city and a few connections in common. Would you be open to connecting? And then I can follow up with a voice note after they've accepted my invite. Not straight away. I don't want to be pouncing on them, but sort of a few weeks later. I love voice notes on LinkedIn as a direct message way of building connection and building pipeline and mentioning what I do in a non-salesy way. So I can send people a voice note. Thanks so much for accepting my invite to connect. You probably didn't have a look at my profile. If you did, you might have noticed I do X, Y, Z. But really just wanted to reach out and say thanks so much for accepting my invite. So doing those voice notes as a sandwich, start with them, end with them. And LinkedIn, you can see who's looking at your profile. If you're already connected to somebody, you can send them a note. Yeah, hey, Aaron, we've been connected for a couple of years and I noticed you just looked at my profile. You're doing all right. Is there anything I can help you with? Let me know. So you can do stuff like that. And that can really flatten the path. I get so many clients just from reaching out to people who have looked at me. And if they like my content or comment on my content, I can see if they're my ideal client. If they're on the other side of the world or the wrong demographic for me, then they're not my ideal client type, then, I don't have to reach out to them. But while with Instagram, anybody could be following you, right? And you don't know who they are.
Yeah, well, like I said, those you can hide behind a handle and a different name and you wouldn't know who's sitting there behind that. I have a really good friend who's built a massive account as a brand, but not as themselves, over 200,000 followers. And he's like, at what point do I let people know that it's me? So you've got all these different, variables that remove the transparency on those other platforms. So I completely agree with you on that sense. It's a maze. On the other platforms, LinkedIn gives you the data. I can see who's looked at my profile, who's done this, and I can go look at all their information that they've got listed and connect the dots to find out if that is someone that is worth building a relationship with.
Yeah, I can see their education level. I can see the companies they work for. I can see their career trajectory. I can see what they do, the city they're in, all that information. And Sales Navigator gives you even more of that data if you wanted even more. It's just so amazing to use it both to buy, but also to sell and in a non-spammy way. And I just don't see the point of having lots of friends online that are not going to be helpful, that, you don't know who they are. And I think it's really powerful when people know you. I've gone to events here in my home city of Sydney in Australia, and I've gone to events and people have recognized me or I've recognized them just from LinkedIn. And that's really cool. That's so powerful. It's, LinkedIn is that handshake you make before you meet somebody in person. It's where people go to validate who you are, especially in a time-poor world where we don't want to waste time with people who might not be right for us. And I think as a society, we're often becoming increasingly shyer in picking up that phone. Making a phone call can feel quite annoying sometimes, can't it? If I've got to go and call my service provider, or I had to go and make a dentist appointment for the kids the other day, and I'm like, seriously, can't I just do this online? Hasn't the dentist got a Calendly link? Like in this day and age, I think we're so used to using digital that I just love that LinkedIn just helps me maximize the return on investment of my time.
Expertly put. Is there anything that you wanted to add to the conversation that we didn't cover that you think is important to mention?
Oh, I think you've asked the best questions, Aaron. I really, really, really do. I'd like to know how you got on journey and how you find LinkedIn. I know you said you do like it, but what do you enjoy most about it?
Oddly enough, I have another agency that's been running for 13 and a half years. It didn't start off specializing in LinkedIn, but that's the platform that ultimately ended up doing. And it's a hybrid scenario of basically setting up joint venture relationships for businesses with other people they can collaborate with in their niche or sector, plus the content element. So I'm very bullish on LinkedIn for creating those one-to-many leveraged opportunities. Who can you build a win-win relationship with in your sector that works with the same clients, that isn't in competition, that is complementary, where you both create these new client streams and get to add value and introduce each other as trusted third-party advisors and that sort of thing. So for me, I just see the leverage capabilities for building incredible relationships that just help more and more people. And that's always been the frame that I've approached LinkedIn from. And I've seen the impact that that's had with clients, especially in the construction sector and in hospitality and places where it's really easy to find collaboration opportunities with people that aren't in direct competition. So that's the lens that I look at it through. And we've got some incredible success stories about just opening one referral relationship up or one partnership, creating millions of dollars in revenue and hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit. So I'm one of the biggest advocates. And certainly for me personally, I think it's just that place where you can go, you can give tremendous value and do it in a place where everyone does have to front up as themselves. And the events one, which you touched on, is huge for people that do educate. You can invite anyone that you're connected to join you online, and you can add value in that session. If you want to offer some support at the end of that, it can be a great leverage way to grow your business and get clients. So that's how I look at it.
I love that. I really love that. And you've just brought to mind something that I don't think people always think of. I don't think is touched in many podcasts or articles or anything, is that LinkedIn is not just a place where you can buy and sell, but it's a place where you can grow those collaborations, by connecting not just with your ideal target market, but with people who work in the same industry as you, but have a different service, but you both have the same clients. Oh, that's gold. I love that tip, Aaron. There's no way I can better that. That's awesome.
Well, I'm sure that everyone that's tuning in is thinking about their profile now, but I'm also a big advocate of, hey, don't do your own tire changes, get the expert, someone that's going to give you the best possible performance. So anyone that's tuned in and got tons of value, but is also looking to get some extra support and not necessarily have to do it themselves, if people wanted that help, how can they get in touch with you, and what's the best way to contact you about that?
So I don't, as said, I don't have lots of products. I have either a paid service where it's 100% done for you. I've discovered over almost 15 years of writing LinkedIn profiles, and I'm actually a bit of a rubbish LinkedIn coach. I'm like, just get out of my way and let me do it for you, please, because I can do it so much better. It's really painful for most people to write about themselves. So they can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and I can write people's LinkedIn profiles for them, or I've got tons of free stuff. I really believe in just giving away stuff. I've got podcast guest episodes like this, others. I've got how-to articles. I've got YouTube videos, all sorts of different pieces that will guide people in building their own profile. And I don't go hard sell. So if anybody just reaches out to connect with me on LinkedIn or sends me an email on LinkedIn, I can send a whole lot of free stuff that can help them to do it themselves.
Amazing. We'll put a link to your profile in the show notes below. So just go there to go contact Karen for that support. You've been so generous with your time and what you shared today. So I just want to say thank you. I've really enjoyed our chat, and I learned a lot talking to you about LinkedIn. So thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. I love your energy, your generosity, and we're very aligned like that. So I'm real thrilled to be with you and your audience. Thank you.